This is advice that I give to other people. I'm like, start a podcast. It can be on whatever you want it to be on, something that you're interested in, but start a podcast and you will just become more natural and comfortable with speaking because you're forced to have all these conversations. So public speaking is the main skill that I've really excelled at through starting that podcast.
Welcome to the LMF Network podcast. My name is Sonya Barlow, the host, CEO and founder. This podcast is all about building our careers and confidence with a mission to build the careers and confidence of 25,000 people by 2025 through mentoring, masterclasses, and meaningful connections. For us, this podcast is about sharing stories, highlighting incredible figures, learning about their career journeys, how they overcome failure, rejection, and imposter syndrome, what we can do to build our confidence, be our biggest cheerleaders, and really define as well as achieve our version of success.
Welcome to another episode of the LMF Network podcast. My name is Sonya Barlow, and today we have with us
Maya Welford.
Maya, what is it you get up to?
So in my day role, I work in a bank in this weird and wonderful field called behavioural finance. We can come on to that. No one really understands what it is. But apart from that, I run my podcast called That's My Name, which explores name-related stories from around the world and cultural naming traditions.
But your name's Maya Welford. It's not really that funky of a name.
Yeah, so let me deconstruct my full name. So my full name is Maya September Welford. Maya is quite an international name, but I'm half Japanese, so a lot of people will not, it is like a kind of Japanese name, but more of an international name. Mitsuko is my Japanese grandma's name, so what I quite like is that it ties me to that side of my identity and heritage. September, really weird one. It was the month that I was born in. Really, really weird. My parents just decided to give me and my sister the months that we were born in as one of our middle names. And then Welford is just that English British tradition of taking your dad's surname.
And at what point did you realise that your name was linked to your culture and therefore your culture and identity was different to the lay person that you see around you?
Honestly, it was at primary school.
Oh, really?
When I was like 7. So I went to school in East London near here, and it was just interesting because it was predominantly Bengali children. And I mean, Maya is a Bengali name as well. But I think because there are a few like white kids, and I'm white passing, right? But there were definitely
You're
like
technically half white.
Yes, yeah.
So and the reason I asked that, sorry to interrupt, is, and this is more of a question of information and curiosity. If you are half British white, then are you white passing or are you white? And at what point do you claim you're white and when do you claim you're Japanese?
Yeah. So I would say that I'm mixed race. Okay. Because my mum is from Asia, which is a completely different continent to Europe and the UK. So I would say if someone is, and again, I'm not an expert on like classifying whether you're white or not, but for me, I would classify myself as mixed race. However, I think if I compare myself to some of my other half Japanese, half English friends, they very much and use the language of I'm a woman of color and that sort of thing. And I personally don't use that term because I don't feel like I am. I mean, maybe technically I am, but though that kind of narrative or language is just something that doesn't feel very kind of natural to me and my identity. So it's a weird one. I go for like mixed race, but I'm very, very aware that when a lot of people look at me, they're like, you're a white person. I mean, look at my color of my skin, I am white, right?
And so based on that, and I guess we digress from the first question, it's really about your culture and your identity. So you recognize that your name was different in primary school.
And the thing is, I don't think it was the name necessarily. Well, yes, the name was different, but I think for me, it was more you are half Japanese and there was no other Japanese kids around, right? Or even half Japanese kids around, apart from my sister who's a few years above. So it was those kind of attacks towards the Japanese side because being Japanese or Chinese in the school that I was in was very unusual and very like weird. And there were things about like what kind of food you eat and like what kind of cultural traditions or like that kind of stuff that I think it really made me want to lean in more to the white side because it was a school in England. And yes, it was predominantly like Bengali children. It was in England. So I was like, let me just deny this Japanese side. Let me really try and lean into this English side. And actually I wanted to change my name. So it's funny that the whole name thing for me started when I was like 7, because I came home and I was like, I want to change my name to like really English, basic name, which is very embarrassing. But I look back and I'm like, that's really sad. The fact that you want to change that really big part of your identity to try and assimilate and be more white.
And the reason I completely empathize with what you're saying is because I am a full-fledged like Pakistani woman, but I've claimed I'm like brown for a very long time. I'm South Asian. And my name comes with its own privilege. It's Sonya Barlow.
Yeah.
When you think of a Sonya Barlow, you don't really think of me, right? And then I get the jokes. It's like, is Gary Barlow your uncle? I'm like, yes, and he doesn't reply to my messages, so DM him and tell him about me. You know, I'm like,
yeah.
But I guess I didn't realize that. How do I say this in a way that kind of makes sense? I didn't really understand. It's not I didn't realize it. It's that I didn't really ever see myself as different until I went into the workspace.
Yeah.
And the workspace reminded me constantly that I was different. Whereas I was like, well, no, I'm not. I'm just a kid running around the playground. And then I'm just a young woman trying to get into university. And then at university, because at university there's a mix and match of everyone and everything.
Yeah.
You didn't really feel that out of place. But to your point, when I got into the workplace, I also really started to deny my Pakistani side and my Asian side, which makes no sense because there's really no getting away from the fact that I am brown. And I really tried to tap into this white culture and conform to their stereotypes and their norms. And that's why I spoke about the drinking culture. I don't drink, but I felt out of place when I wasn't in that scenario. But I also felt out of place when I was in that scenario because you don't know how to navigate yourself.
Yeah.
Or even my accent, or even my name, or even who I was as a person. So I really tried to conform and lean on this like white British side that didn't really exist, because it meant that I could go up the ladder and I could be one of them and not be the other. But one thing I've realized is I've always been the other. I've just embraced the othership. And it's not till I got to the workspace that it really started bothering me. And I remember, and I've had a lot of experiences that actually in hindsight, I'm like, what the hell was that? I remember I was in one of my first workspaces in 2015, 2016. And we were having like a WebEx call at that point because, you know, WebEx was a thing. And this was maybe like 20 minutes into a meeting, like an official meeting someone was having. And they stopped the meeting and one of my colleagues on my team, you know, on the WebEx was like, hey, Sonya, so we all have a question for you. I was like, okay, yeah, what's the question? Thinking it was going to be work related. And they were like, oh, so we want to know why your name's Sonya Barlow. And now I'm saying this in 2023 and people are going to be like, you're so silly. Did you not know that was inappropriate then? But I didn't know. I just kind of went along with it. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, well, this is why. And I felt like I had to explain myself and justify who I am and my identity and the culture I come from. And maybe because of that and other experiences, I then wanted to lean on well, I'm British. I'm not brown side. And the reason I bring that up now is because I think I have a little bit of a cultural identity thing going on. Where I'm trying to reconnect with my roots somehow. But I'm not quite sure how to do that.
Yeah. And I was actually speaking to someone about like ancestry even this week, and she was like, there's something so powerful in researching and really understanding your ancestry. And that's not who your granddad was or who your great grandparents was. It is, okay, let's look back years and years and years and years. Where am I from? Where do I originate from? And what are the cultural practices and traditions that my ancestors practiced and were part of their lives? And maybe how can I be leaning into those more and adopting those? And I think that element might be really, really helpful for you.
But I also touch on that point because when we're thinking about careers and confidence building and just being a person in the workspace, it's about owning our own identity first and then helping to create that culture of belonging and inclusion. Whereas when we go into the workspace, a lot of the time, and this is an ongoing discussion, especially with young professionals today, all over TikTok, all over Instagram, all over LinkedIn, is they don't want to conform. They want to be their best, truest selves. But I am a big believer that there is no such thing as your true self that you can take into work. You can take your true work self into work, but your whole self, no one's trying to actually bring their whole self to work, because my whole self might get me cancelled, or it may not be what the workspace wants, or, you know, it's I don't want to bring my whole self, because actually sometimes you split the day into who you are and your character. And also because I bring that into a relevant play, because if you haven't, being, you know, Japanese and kind of British, if that's something that you've maybe struggled is a big word, but if you've, you know, been dealing with that narrative or a lack of narrative for so long, how do you then really show up as your full confident self if you don't know what your full confident self is?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we're really multifaceted individuals, like you and I, but like everyone. And we can't be everything at all times. So I definitely agree with you with the point around, yes, you will want to bring and be your authentic self. I think there's a difference between like being authentic and bringing your whole self, or bringing all of you, because you can't bring all of you at all times. There's things that you might dial up in certain situations and things that you might kind of dial down in other situations. And I think that that's just quite natural and human. But I think it becomes dangerous when you're like, okay, this is a really big part of my identity, and actually I need to hide it and conceal it because I'm scared that it's going to have really negative impacts on how people view me in the workplace. So I think that there's a bit of a difference, but we are super multifaceted, and it's important to embrace that, but realize that we can't be everything all at once.
And companies need to really lean into that. So I a lot of the work that we do now is helping companies to understand how their people are their best people selves, the most productive, the happiest, the most efficient, how we can lean into that, be that changing the ways in which they work, tap into their kind of neurodivergent best selves, or just making sure that we're taking their cultural expectations and understandings into play. So a good example being, you're speaking about the kind of the Asian side, just as a continent. I remember when I started in the workspace, I used to look and talk to my elders by looking at their chest, because that was what I've been taught. I've been taught you give respect to elders if you look at their chest, and it found it really hard to like not call them uncle or auntie. Yeah. But then my manager was like, you don't respect me, you're not looking into my eyes when I speak. I'm like, what are you talking about? The cultural background that I come from is X. Yeah. And at that point, I was like, it's a shame that you're not even trying to understand my cultural background, but you want everything to be the way that it suits you. Yeah. Whereas you're not even trying to adapt and learn about other people. And I think that's what really struck me, and that's probably why I am a semi-activist of some kind, because I'm like, wait, why is it that I have to change for you? Why is it that you can't take a moment to learn from me? Yeah, definitely. For me, like with that Japanese side, my mum would always, like growing up, you must respect your elders, believed in like hierarchy, and when you're in the workplace or even like within family, like you must respect your elders, your parents, your grandparents, and like you'll be quiet in certain situations, right? And that was instilled in me. Definitely rebelled when I was a teenager, didn't really give a fuck. I don't know if I can swear on this. But then when I joined the workplace, having never experienced a corporate setting, neither of my parents really worked in these big, shiny, fancy corporate offices. And when I entered that workplace for my internship 6-7 years ago, I was quiet and I respected leadership, and I didn't really speak up because I was taught throughout my life, you respect your elders. So when I was in an environment that's so alien to me, I was quiet. And at the end of my 9-week internship, the managing director of my team, she goes, you're a wallflower and you'll never be a leader because I haven't heard you speak. And I'm like, okay, like that kind of stuck with me, but I was like, actually, and this is something that you shared, I think last week when I heard you speak around, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to go and do it. Oh, it annoys me.
And I'm like, and she's got me on LinkedIn. She's left the organization now a long time ago. But I'm like, I'm sure you can see me now, and I'm sure you can see that I'm not a wallflower. So yeah.
And I think not everyone's fueled by that, and I didn't know that I was until the last few years. Where I'm like, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. But also like, how can you, based on this like moment of knowing me, have this like big worldly judgment, like you can't do this, you can't do X, you can't do Y. Forget like the good and bad managers. I've had managers who, I remember when I negotiated my first internal promotion at the workplace, they were like, oh well no, you don't get an extra pot of money for it. And I was like, but that's unfair, because if you were hiring someone from external, they do. Yeah. Then when I got actually when I got monetary compensation, they were like, oh, it's going to be 2% in line with inflation. I was like, you said it's going to be 10%. You told me that for months. They were like, oh, you're not that level. I was like, let me build a business case. I remember my manager, in not so many words, I'm paraphrasing, basically took me to the side and was like, if you build a business case, absolutely not. Is that going to work for us? Because it's just going to show that you're like rebellious. And I was like, well, that's not true. And also she was like, and you have chronic migraines, so actually you'll never be a leader.
Oh my God.
I was like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. And then eventually I started to get so frustrated. So to your point, I think when I started in the workplace, I was like quiet. But I naturally can't be quiet, and not for a long time, because my insides, and I don't have a poker face. So even if I don't say what I'm saying, you can tell by my face. Unfortunately, I'm very like animated in that sense. But I think going back to the point is, I then was like, okay, well, if you're not going to give me the work and that's as fast as if you're not going to give me the stability and the compensation that I want internally, I'm going to go externally for it. And I remember within like 3 months of just her saying that, I negotiated a 20 grand pay rise externally.
Yeah.
And I left. And I left thinking, you could have kept me and I would have been loyal. And I would have loved you and you would have loved me. And we would have done great, wonderful work things together.
Yeah.
And that's how I think I was just bold and brave enough to make that step and go somewhere else. But also, that's one reason why there aren't enough women in the workspace. Yeah, because other people, regardless of their gender or their experience, tear down ambition. They tear down people who aren't conforming. They hire you because you're quirky. And then when you get into the workplace, they want you to conform.
Yeah.
And that's not cool. And a lot of young professionals are facing that right now, but also the Gen Zs of the world, they're like, you know what, we're happy to take a pay cut if it aligns with our values, but we're also happy to not work here because we're not here to take nonsense, which really contradicts the cost of living crisis. And the whole thing is really interesting to me. And I guess for me, I really wanted to, on this podcast or on this episode, cover like identity and representation in our own culture and how we're using that to either fuel, help or hinder the work that we're doing. And for a very long time, I think I was really angry inside, and that really fueled me. The problem is now I'm not angry anymore. And so I don't really have a lot of fuel or fire for me to run after. And that itself makes you want to pivot or adjust the work you're doing, because my drivers have changed. When I was first in the workplace, my drivers were money and respect and growth and career ladder. And now I'm like, okay, mine's purpose and social values and social good, but stuff like that doesn't pay big bucks.
Yeah. I think so many people are having that mindset shift towards, yes, we want to get paid, but actually, how can I make that impact on society? How can I make that impact in the world? And I think what's been a real catalyst is the pandemic. The pandemic has had so many different impacts in so many different areas of society and the world. But I definitely think that we're now realizing that life is so short, and life is it's just so short. And why spend your time in a miserable space surrounded by miserable people in a toxic environment? People are like, actually, now we're allowed to travel, now we're allowed to see the world. Why would I just sit here and waste my life with people that are not serving me?
And that energy and that kind of realm of serving is really important as well. So you started working several years ago, and now you have a full-time day job. And you said that your side hustle per se is starting your podcast.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that fear of no one's going to listen, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to edit?
So really, really practical. I was just like, I'm just going to record 10 episodes and that's what I'm going to do. And I feel like you gave me the advice, actually. I feel like you were literally like, have fun with it and just...
I think we were walking down the bridge in Bermondsey.
Yeah.
A warm drink.
Yeah.
I was like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have fun with it and I'm just going to record 10 episodes and that's going to be it. And here I am 2 years later and I've recorded I don't know how many episodes. And the thing is, I never wanted it to be like a job, because I was like, I don't want it to be a chore. I don't want to hate this. I want to have fun with this. And that's something that I've really reminded myself at times when I'm like, oh, do I have to post today? And I'm like, no, I don't have to post because I don't want to post today and I'm not getting paid to post and this is not my job and I don't have a manager. I am my manager. So yeah, I mean, just setting myself that small goal and then being like, it's fun.
It's fun. The reason I ask the questions about the podcast is because that itself is quite a brave move, and a lot of people want to start podcasts. I mean, everyone right now wants to be a podcaster or a YouTuber or a presenter, probably including myself. But it's quite hard to get going, and also then I don't think starting is the hard part. I think carrying it on is the harder part. The starting is really easy. Like, I started a YouTube channel, I started this podcast, and then you come 10 episodes in, you're like, oh, now I need to commit to it. And that commitment bit is often where people fall down. So how did you reach out to some of the cool names that you've had? And, you know, what was your like pitch as to why they should come and speak to you, especially when people are time busy?
Yeah, definitely. So my first few guests were like friends and people that I knew, and I was like, I've got this idea, like, do you want to come help me out? And they were like, yeah, of course. But then after that, it kind of snowballed, and I have people just like DMing me or messaging me on LinkedIn being like, this is my name story. And I feel so humbled when people like open up and share their story with me. And I'm like, this is interesting. This is cool. Like, come on the podcast. And I'd love to speak to you more about this. I think people more and more are sharing on LinkedIn about their names. I'm just seeing these posts about this is what my name means, or this is my experience with my name. So people will now tag me in those, and I'll be like, oh, great person. Like, do you want to come on my podcast? So it happens very organically, which is nice. I don't have to like chase loads of people. I would love to like have people, like more kind of famous, influential people to help kind of build it and get it more public. I have DM'd some people and they've just like not really got back to me. Chunks, I want you to be on my podcast. So yeah, I mean, some people just literally don't reply, and I'm like, that's fine. But other people, it's quite organic.
And so what are the skill sets that you've learned through your side hustle that you're probably taking into your workspace? Not that they need you to take that in, right? Because what we're saying is you have two very separate lives.
Yeah.
And so it's about transferring of skills. And like you said, your 9 to 5 doesn't pay you to do your 5 to 9, but it's something that you want to enjoy. But what skills have you learned that you've been able to kind of really transfer?
The main one is public speaking. And this is advice that I give to other people. I'm like, start a podcast. It can be on whatever you want it to be on, something that you're interested in, but start a podcast and you will just become more natural and comfortable with speaking, because you're forced to have all these conversations. So public speaking is the main skill that I've really excelled at through starting that podcast.
And I guess one reason which you've spoken about already is starting a podcast is to understand your name and name stories a little bit better. And then earlier we spoke about that cultural identity kind of, mismatch, and when you feel like you aren't enough of one thing and enough of the other. And though I can't relate it from that aspect, I can when it comes to other kind of, identity metrics that we all measure. What is your relationship like now with yourself and with both of your cultures?
Yeah, I mean, I have learned to love my name, fully embrace my Japanese culture and my Japanese heritage. I love Japan. I went there recently and spent an amazing time there with family and was really able to reconnect, very much kind of improving on my Japanese language skills and that sort of thing. And for me, it's really, there is this like British culture, but like when we say British culture, like what do we even mean? Like,
it's so funny you say that, right? I was watching this show on Netflix and I think it's called Fried Crunchy Chicken or something like that. I can't remember, Fried Crispy Chicken, but basically it's a really like famous food blogger who goes around America and tries different aspects of fried food. So he tries different fried foods and has made like a really cool series around it. And the reason I laugh is because in one location he went to in America, the cuisine was British. I was like, what is British cuisine? Like, what are you actually serving, right? And so this was like, they were like, fish and chips is British. Fried like calamari is British. Yeah. Fried this is British. Fried that is British. They had like sandwiches with like cheese and chips, all the way to scones. And I looked at that food, I'm like, wow, British food is so beige.
Yeah, beige plate.
Like it's so beige. And it's all what is fried or it's potatoes. It's just different forms of potatoes, how you can cut and how you can spice it. So
Not even spice, just a bit of salt and pepper.
Honestly, I found it so funny. And then I look at myself and I'm like, I'm British, but my food habits are much more, obviously, like Pakistani. I find it really funny that all of these people want to travel to England and have like British food. I'm like, well, but what is British food? It's like pie and mash, fish and chips, scones, and, sandwiches with chips and crisps in it and cheese in it. Like, so we digress, but I just found it really... Which is funny.
Exactly. And I think that really shows that like there is no like one British culture. And like what I think I love about my like, I guess, cultural mix is like I have my own culture within the world that I live in and within London. And I think everyone kind of has that. Like you have your own culture and what being British to you might be very different to me or someone else. So yeah, no, fully embracing it, love it. Yeah, it's great.
What are some mistakes that you've made along the way in your career, in your cultural identity, in just trying to embrace whoever you are like whichever kind of place you're in at that time?
I think probably mistakes early on in my career, definitely trying to conform, trying to fit in, code switching.
Oh, code switching.
That's a whole other topic.
What? So, you know, the interesting thing is most people I speak to don't know what code switching is.
Oh, okay.
So I think until you code switch, or until someone's actually giving you the definition of the term, you don't realise.
Yeah.
So how would you define code switching?
So I would define code switching as, in different situations, changing the way that you show up and how you present. So whether that be your accent, I mean, mainly for me, it is like your accent, right?
How does your accent change?
My accent still changes.
Oh, it does?
It still changes, especially like on the weekends.
You can see I'm like up and peppy about this. I'm like, oh, okay, code switching.
Especially, this is really funny. Like, it's just, it just happens. Like, if it's the weekend and I've had a drink, my voice is just like so East London, which is really funny. So I still feel like I do code switch, but it's so like ingrained in me. And again, I think it is from like growing up, and like my mum would tell me, like, you know, the usual thing that you need to work 20 times harder because you're a girl and da-da-da-da. But also like, Maya, you need to be polite and you need to be well-spoken and da-da-da, all this kind of stuff. Don't use slang, like be well-spoken, otherwise you won't progress. So I feel like, and obviously no hate to my mum, like absolutely love her. And she's probably going to hate me for saying this, but I just feel like those childhood experiences, they have an impact on how you maybe show up and present in the workplace.
Yeah, but I mean, your mom said that. I say that.
Yeah.
It's not just mothers, it's like I've said it too. So even for myself, this is not my natural accent. I mean, it is now.
Yeah.
But was it between the age of 5 where I didn't know English and came to the UK to the age of 11 where I lived in a council estate?
Yeah.
No. But did I know that I had to refine my accent and speak a certain way if I wanted to progress into a certain line or field? You know what? Unfortunately, that is the one thing that I've been aware of since I was like 10. And if you know me, you know that I'm not aware of a lot of things, okay? I kind of really live in my own bubble. And so when it comes to code switching, for me, it's like, for me, maybe it wasn't always my accent, because the problem is I used to know Urdu quite a lot when I was younger. And then because I was conforming and because I was code switching, because I was trying to be more British, I personally like kind of neglected my Pakistani side. And so I started forgetting the language because I was trying to pick up other bits. So for me, code switching was more around having to change your thinking, your identity, your perception based on the situations you are and the obstacles you're facing. So code switching for me is I'm naturally not in, I don't drink, but I don't really like staying up late. Yeah. But being in that uncomfortable situation because you feel like you have to be there because that's how you're going to get promoted, and then going home to like a brown family and explaining what you've done all day to them, and then being an older sister, and then waking up and then going and being like this junior in a workplace that's working for this big brand, and then running a side hustle, and then doing and then it's the different like characters that you're playing, but you're playing them so fast that yes, you're naturally good at it, but also it hurts your head. It's painful after a while. Yeah. And you know, a big part of why code switching now is deemed as like a negative and not as a, oh my God, you're able to like adapt in the workplace, is because often code switching comes with the narrative or the connotation that by being your version of your actual authentic self, you're oppressed in some way, and you're discriminated, and so you have to play the game to make sure that those, you know, other privileges and powers don't negatively impact your day to day, which is exhausting.
I think, and to your point earlier, I think so many more people do it than they realize. And I mean, I literally code switch, and I code switch both ways, right? So I'll code switch when I'm like in the workplace. Like even last week I had a conversation with someone, not at work, but outside of work. And when I got on this call with her, her accent she was like very well spoken. So for me, like I just heard myself like just starting to just be like, yeah, so, and I was just like, what are you doing? Like in my head, I was like, what the fuck are you doing? But then I do it the other way. Like last night I was at an amazing event and met a woman from East London. And when you meet people from East London, as someone from East London, I'm like, you're my people. And then the accent switches. For me, it's both ways. And I'm like, I think maybe it's just part of who I am.
And I think, and I love that, because I think it is a part of who we are, but it's also, I think it's a really positive skill set to have. And if we can embrace our code switching in a way that doesn't exhaust us, but basically flip on its head and say, you know what, code switching means that we are able to adapt to a given situation, level up, down, dial down certain attributes without it being from a place of discrimination or oppression or you know, a kind of a power and privilege aspect colliding. That is a benefit. But if we're code switching because we think our natural selves don't deserve to be in that space or aren't good enough to be there, or we don't think that we can really, you know, win that opportunity if we were who we really are, I think that's when it becomes problematic. And also from an outside perspective, we also need to challenge this whole concept of this is what good looks like, because that itself is, I think, causing us for, it's not setting us up for success. It's increasing false news and misinformation and virality for the sake of it. Like, I know that you're not massive on social media, right? And I know that it's taken you years to even make like an Instagram profile. And I only started using social media in 2020, but now 2023, I really don't have the same level of care for it as I once did. And I just find it a distraction, because I think everyone's doing the same or similar thing, and I'm not really gaining value. And, you know, saying that, yes, you are what you consume. So I try and follow the relevant hashtags. I'm following the relevant people, especially journalists, so I can learn around tech and AI and upcoming trends and business and travel, you know, things that I'm interested in, careers, education. But I've also muted a lot of accounts because I'm like, listen, you don't serve me. And also I don't serve you, right? So like, there's no real reason to pop into each other's feed, and you don't have to post 7 times a day. Who are you posting for?
For me, I'm like, let's add value. Let's stop adding noise. Like, the world is so noisy. I open my phone and it's just noise. So I'm like, let's just add value, not noise.
How do you feel about, you know, the new trends of tech? Though they're not actually new. I think they're just hyper glamorized right now. AI.
ChatGPT.
Do you think AI is going to take your job?
No, absolutely not. I mean, my job links a lot to psychology, and like with psychology, you need those kind of people skills. So no, it's not going to take my job. And to be honest, like if it did take my job or could take my job, I'd be like, great, I can find something else to do, you know? So I think there's a big fear, and there's such a narrative around, oh my God, AI is like going to steal our jobs or take our jobs. And it's kind of this like us versus AI kind of thing. And I think that's a bit of a dangerous narrative to have, because if AI is automating jobs that can be automated, that's freeing up people to engage in creativity and engage in more brain stimulating activities. So I see it as a benefit. Maybe in the short term, yes, I think with any new technology, they definitely have negatively disproportionate impacts on already marginalized groups. And I researched this in my dissertation for my master's. I completely acknowledge that and get that. And it's something that we need to be aware of and make sure that we kind of mitigate for that. But I think in the long term, it will free us up to be a more kind of happier society.
And I think one thing people don't realize with AI is literally what we make of it. So AI is not just like magically it was born out of an egg situation. You know, it's like something, it wasn't like handed down to us. It's like a human creation. And so humans play a fundamental role in how AI is changing the landscape, the tech that's being kind of, you know, enabled via it, but also the data that we're spewing in and out. So you need to make sure that your data is therefore relevant and real time and
not full of bias.
Reduces or kind of, you know, reduces bias or de-risk. Churn it and then put it into the tools, and then churn out something that's actually going to positively impact processes and individuals around you. And, you know, I think so recently, just the other day, actually, they announced that some universities are going to be allowing AI and ChatGPT or their processes and their outputs, at least when it comes to exams and materials and writing. Now, as someone who's written a book and has spent 6 months writing it, or as someone who wants to go into travel writing, or as an individual who is just generally trying to build up that skill, I think ChatGPT can be cheating at times. And I'm not really for the cheating element.
No.
I personally am the kind of user that's like, hey, ChatGPT, this is the description I have for my YouTube video. Can you optimize it for SEO? So you do the work.
That.
It's literally what I spent a lot of time doing that.
Love that.
Don't really know if it worked, because it does like churn out some weird stuff. But anyways, But I'm a big fan of like doing the work and then getting it to check over it.
Yeah.
And also what people don't know is most ChatGPT is information stops at 2021.
Yeah.
We're in 2023. It's obviously not relevant. And so for me, it just blows my mind where it's like, it's going to take our jobs. Yeah, but like, 15 years ago, banks went from having high street offices to digitalizing. Yes, that lost some jobs, but it also gave you more.
Yeah.
And with 1 in 4 people now wanting to have a side hustle, or 75% of Gen Zs wanting to have passive income of or another side stream, isn't it kind of freeing up our time? What I'm not into, when you touched on the pandemic earlier, is I think the pandemic taught us a lot of things. And one thing I think the pandemic really taught me, or tried to teach me, is you don't need to be hyper productive and you can slow down. And yet I feel like the workspaces, us as people, we're trying to run towards something once again that doesn't really make any sense. So for me, it's like, use AI to make me more productive and to really filter out the emails that I don't need to be answering. But let's not be in a position where we're losing opportunities because we don't reply back to a message in 3 hours. Not everyone's on their phones.
Exactly.
And I feel like, I don't know if you feel it, and I'd love to understand, I think, yes, there's a lot of noise in the world. There's a lot of misinformation. I think also we're going back to this point where people are just expecting things instantly and forgetting to be kind to ourselves and focus on our mental health. And companies are like, mental health matters, but their people are overworking overtime. It just feels like a big contradiction.
And again, I think the pandemic, why do I keep talking about the bloody pandemic? I guess it was such a big thing in our lives. I think there are a lot of contradictions, especially and I haven't worked in the startup, but I think especially in startup, and I was having this conversation yesterday about a lot of startups being like, we're a family. And it's like, we shouldn't be a family because this is work and I need boundaries. And as I said, I haven't worked in a startup, but I see so many like job descriptions or speak to so many people at startups who are burnt out, miserable, because the CEO or the founder, it's their baby. So they expect everyone around them to be like, you should treat this like your baby and everything. You should work all hours of the day. And these employees who aren't like, haven't necessarily got a stake in this, they're burning out. They're miserable.
Yeah, the reason I'm on my phone is because I'm just going to find up this Financial Times article that literally came out yesterday and just read the headline. So Financial Times in July 2023 sometime, released an article around nutrition, sleep and mental health advice offered to tech founders at the risk of burnout. They've also touched on high stress workplaces, breed toxicity, and how AI is combating burnout. But then you have the Tom Blomfields of the world, who is the co-founder of, who is the founder of Monzo, who took that leap once upon a time and said, "Listen, I'm burnt out as a founder, and so I'm going to step back." That's amazing. He did that. That also comes with a lot of privilege. He did it after years, and so let's take his like burnout to the side. He has financial stability. He has security. He has the means. He was able to take that time out. I love the fact he was brave enough to say, look, Monzo is growing, but I literally need a moment for myself. And I think we have to give credit where credit's due. He used his power to his privilege, which I'm all for. And he said, let's take a moment because it's exhausting. If someone who is so infamous in our world has been able to take a step back, why is it that the rest of us are not learning from that? And why is it that companies or news articles like the Financial Times will have a big heading to be like, we need to help tech founders with burnout, but then what are we actually doing? Because we're still expecting them, I'm a tech founder, I know, to work constantly. We're, looking at how we're investing our means and funds and saying, well, you can't take a break and you can't take a holiday, and why is it that you're taking time off? We want a quick exit. It's not really helping towards the ESG, so environmental, social, or governance of a kind of society and the policies. But we're constantly like inducing and encouraging this system that we know doesn't work well. And the reason I brought up the pandemic was because it was that one time that we all collectively as a universe sat down and we were like, hey, we don't need to be on emails for 7 hours a day. And actually, the world is not going to burn down, literally, if we don't reply back straight away. And yet, now, like you said, we're contradicting ourselves once again, and we're expecting people not to show up, but to stay up, to work late nights, to work on the weekends. And young professionals of today are confused.
Something that when I first started on a grad scheme, one of my first managers, she sat me down at the very beginning and she was like, Maya, I don't ever want you to stress about work because we're not saving lives. We're not heart surgeons and we're not saving lives. And I feel and I shouldn't feel lucky to have had that experience, because I feel
I
like
wish someone told me that.
Yeah, right? Like, it should just be a normal thing that everyone should be told. But when I hear from so many people that have had to endure really toxic workplaces, I'm like, that stuck with me. And I'm like, yeah, like, I take my work seriously and I work hard, but I'm not going to stress over, I do stress sometimes, but I'm not going to stress over this, because I'm not saving anyone's life through what I'm doing. So it's fine. It can wait till tomorrow. It can wait till next week. It's cool. But I think so many people just at the very beginning of their career, they enter a toxic workplace and they're like, this is actually normal. I have to just be overworked, and I have to be stressed because this is my first experience and I don't know anything different. So I think I come from a place, again, of privilege, to have had that privilege of being in a workplace that really allowed me to have that balance and continues to allow me to have that balance. But so many people don't get that, and that just continues and leads to burnout and all of those horrible things that we're seeing.
And I guess on that point, because you are growing in your world of work, and because you're kind of running your side hustle, and because you're also navigating your own identity, how do you manage your, therefore, mental health? But also, what is your advice to people who also want to just be kinder to themselves? And the reason I say that as a question, because it's really easy to be like, hey, be kind to yourself. But it's like, okay, but what does that mean in practicality?
Yeah.
Like, for me, being kind to myself is, a really good example is yesterday. I got rejected from this gig, which I was perfect for, right? And I kid you not, I know that I was great for it and I should have gotten it. Saying that though, this possible opportunity only came into my inbox 48 hours prior. So it's not really an opportunity I had. It's not money that was mine. It was just, I was like, oh my God, they want me to do this. I am perfect for this. I pitched myself. Everything was good. I thought I had it in the bag. So, this was Tuesday. I got the opportunity. Thursday, I got we're sorry to inform you, but you did not make the cut and we will be going with someone else. And I looked at that email and I was like, oh my God, I am useless and everything I've done is useless and I'm just going to be sad. But then I realized that for me, being kind to yourself is actually then being able to be sad for a moment. Yeah. Rather than being hyper productive. So I went and I switched off my emails, and I went and made myself a cup of tea, and I got a big bowl of cheesecake, and I watched Exo Kitty on Netflix. And I was like, this is how I'm being kind to myself, is I'm actually taking a moment to flow through whatever emotion, to accept a rejection, and to be okay with it. And I think you've hit the key thing here, is that being kind to yourself might look completely different to what it looks like to me, to anyone else. So I think it's taking the time to test things out and find out, okay, I'm feeling shit. I want to be kind to myself. What does that look like? I don't really know. I'm going to try this thing out. Oh yeah, actually that helped. I'm going to try this thing out. No, I still felt shit. I felt worse. Try things out. Test things out. Have fun with it. And I think you'll then be able to develop those habits which help you to be kinder to yourself. And the fact that you juggle so much, sorry, there's literally your question and I felt like I answered it. No, not at all. The fact that you're juggling so much and you're kind of navigating this space, especially as you're growing and evolving as a human person, how are you kind to yourself? I spend time with loved ones. So on the weekends, I really try not to think about work, like my day role. It's really, for me, it's those personal connections, and I love spending that quality time. So I have one of my best friends, she's got 2 daughters, they're 10 and 3, and I think when you spend time with children, you just forget any shit that's going on, because you'll have to be so present and so in the moment. So for me, that's something that it is a way that I am kind to myself, and it's something that I really, really enjoy. And the second thing is just being in nature. So whatever that might look like, I love just being surrounded by trees and greenery. That's just something that's so powerful, I think, for being kind in your mental well-being. And then my last bit in this episode, before we wrap up, because I'm looking at the time being like, yeah, we probably need to wrap up, is I thought we'd try something new. We're going to test it out. It might work, it might not work, it's fine. But I think that's a premise. I feel like you're going to get me to do star jumps or something. No, I don't do star jumps, but I want to do a would you rather. Okay, let's do it. I'm going to do that. Then this is, if it works, this is actually, I'm going to go out into the streets of London and ask people stuff like this, because I think that's the best thing to do. And I haven't really planned the questions, but it's fine. Would you rather work 5 days a week for a job that you love, that doesn't pay well, or work 3 days a week for a job that pays really well but doesn't align with your values?
Can I ask you questions based on that, or do I just have to answer it? For the job that
I don't know, I
pays...
haven't really thought this out, but I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say it's a would you rather. It's not.
All right, I'd rather work 3 days a week, and then that would allow me to have 4 days a week of focusing fully on stuff that I love.
That's good. That's a good answer. Would you rather have a month off in one go, or have a week off every quarter?
A week off every quarter. I think that's a nice like refresh, reset, take time to yourself. I feel like that should be a thing.
The week off?
Yeah.
I feel like managers should try and implement that.
Yeah, I like that.
You know, I feel like I feel like a manager or like a senior stakeholder should be like, hey, Sonya, you haven't taken your week off this quarter. Can we just make sure that you take it off?
I like it.
Versus like, and the reason I asked that question also, we're digressing, but when I first started my job role, I know that you had annual leave, but I didn't take any because I was like, oh my God, they're going to fire me if I take it, which makes no sense, right? I like literally was... Yeah. I was a bit of, I don't know, I was confident, but at the same time I was like quite scared. And I remember I like racked all my annual leave up at the end, and it made no sense because I'm like, I was burnt out during that position. Would you rather have a career as a actress or a musician?
Okay, let me give you one.
Okay.
Would you rather only eat potatoes for the rest of your life, and that's the only thing you can eat, but you can do it in like different variations? Or would you rather only drink tea for the rest of your life?
Then no potatoes?
Yeah.
I'd happily only drink tea.
Okay.
Would you rather eat Japanese food for the rest of your life or British food
Japanese!
For the rest of your life?
Oh my God, come on, that's not even like, I don't even need to think about that. Japanese food is the best.
What's good about it?
Everything. Like, it's fresh, it's healthy, it's just so delicious. It's so varied. We've got like the noodles, the rice, the sushi, the fish. So good.
I feel like that's a nice natural ending to an episode that started with mushroom tea and coffee and has a lot in between and now has ended with food. So Maya, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I've loved it.
And of course, we're going to change things around and we want to get you involved. So subscribe, like and share, tell your friends, tell your managers, ping it all over social media. If you want to get in touch and be a guest, it's hello@lmfnetwork.com. If you have any questions, you can just slide into our DMs or leave them in the comment section. And hopefully you've enjoyed it. And if there's anything that you'd like us to cover, just let us know.
Learn more about the podcast, get involved and listen via our website www.lmfnetwork.com. You can follow us across all socials at LMF Network. Remember to like, subscribe, share and tell a friend. Get involved and drop us your comments or questions so that we can make sure that it's really adding value to your lives.